It's not a bad number, is it? So the matter with things, which is bigger than my attempt to read it and understand it all, but the matter with things seems to me to be about metaphysics. There's a metaphysical basis to it. There's a spiritual basis to it. There's something that sort of always lingers in the background of the book, which is that the nature of consciousness is more than we think it is, and that there is a spiritual basis to life. I don't know if you'd say that was accurate and what your view would be on this, because if we're going to move beyond this kind of broken way of seeing that we've been talking about for an hour, some sort of it's got to have some sort of spiritual basis to it, it seems to me. But that word obviously is both loaded and capacious and could mean lots of different things. I just wonder if you have a sense of where that leaves you, what you believe is the kind of if we were to talk now about what would be a better way of living than the one we're in at the moment and how to move towards it, what sort of spiritual basis do you think there should be for it? I know it's a huge question.
It is a huge question. There's a more manageable question which is implied there, which is um, how important would having a spiritual outlook be?
Hmm.
And my answer to that is essential. And I think of what Solzhenitsyn said when he looked back on the horrors of the 20th century, which in large measure he had experienced. And he said, when I asked myself how this could have happened, the only answer I can give is because men have forgotten God.
Yeah.
And it's a phrase that I come back to and come back to. And when people ask about, well, what can we do in this current mess that we're in? I think, well, one of the important things is that we must rediscover the sanctity, the sacredness of existence, of the cosmos in general. The word means the beautiful, and it's coined by Pythagoras. And his vision of the cosmos was that it had intrinsic creative power and beauty, and I believe that is the case. I don't think it's directionless at all. And although physicists have known this for at least 100 years, finally, biologists are catching up and saying, no, it was ridiculous denying that things have any kind of direction or purpose. Life seems to be the obvious one that clearly does, and we could talk about that if you want, but anyway, I think rediscovering that is essential. And of course, there are practical steps to do with politics, and there are increasingly more spiritual answers. I mean, when people ask me what should we do, I say, well, there are probably 3 levels on which we can think of this. And the one that you will possibly have been indoctrinated into thinking is the most important is frankly the least important. And the one that is the least important apparently is the most important. And what I'm referring to there is, yes, belonging to a pressure group that will help to change policy. That is obviously an important step forward. Historically, so far, it's been remarkably poor in achieving an outcome. The second level is that of I'm trying to think of his name, Dougal Hine,
Hmm.
at work in the ruins. And I don't know if you know that, but it's
Yes, I do
his
indeed. Yeah.
yeah. So his vision, as you know, then is that we may not be able to avoid the coming of the ruins, but we need to be at work already, finding ways of living that are sustainable and able to be, as it were, disseminated on a larger scale once people are able to see that this is a way forward. And that way forward would be a more humble way of looking at life with fewer demands and with greater fellowship and communion with the earth and other spiritual things. But the third element in the picture is that of changing your own heart and mind, that in fact there is nothing more important than the disposition of your soul towards the world. And it's the only thing that you actually have control over. These other things you can only minimally influence. But the one thing you can really definitely deal with is the thing that is under your control, which is your own way of thinking, feeling, and being. And you can start that tomorrow. And and then they say, oh, well, that's so small, but what does it matter what I do? But actually, nothing would ever change in the world if everybody thought that way. It only changes because often quite small groups of people start to think quite differently about what life should be like.
Yeah.
And Christ himself was and his small group of disciples were a bit like that. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's always struck me that one of the reasons that political revolutions inevitably fail is that the people who carry them out precisely haven't done that. They've just gone out there with their grand vision of how the world should work, but they haven't made themselves work properly, and so they reproduce the tyranny that they're trying to replace in the first place. Yeah, well, speaking of Christ, it's very interesting to me that he didn't write anything down, didn't give us a book, just gave us a church, just gave us a community actually, and said, okay, go and live like this. And the early Christians used to call the teaching of Christ the way, which is rather lovely because it also echoes the kind of Taoist understanding of the world. Go and live like
Yes.
this, go and do this, and go and treat other people like this. This is the way to do it. And it's interesting you mentioned Dougal because Dougal and I started the Dark Mountain Project about 15 years ago.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course you
And
know one another.
yeah, well, we worked together for a while. I haven't seen him for quite a while, but his book is his book is very good, and it echoes something that came out of that project right from the beginning, which is precisely that notion that things are probably coming down, but when they come down, there's an opportunity to start doing things differently again, and I feel like that's exactly what's going on. Um,
Mm.
and I suppose you must get this question all the time when you're speaking to lawyers and you're speaking to bishops and you're speaking to all of these different people, and they're presumably asking you, so what are we going to do about this? Because you've
Mm.
laid out this enormous roadmap, this mental
Mm.
map of the world. It seems
Mm.
sometimes like it's very different to get where we want to be from where we are, if not impossible.
Yes. Well, yes, and I think what they're looking for usually is what the left hemisphere would like, which is I'm going into
5 point
supercharged.
plan.
Yeah, I need a 5 point plan,
Hmm.
and I need bullet points. These are the things to do, and then I'll go away and do them. But Christ didn't say that. Christ said, you have been taught that there are the Ten Commandments and so on. But I say to you, there are only two commandments: love God and love your neighbor.
Hmm.
I may be misquoting, but roughly
Hmm.
speaking, that was
No,
the
that's it.
drift.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, in other words, it was not a number of things to do, but it was of being, not a code.
It's a
And
way of
when I
relation.
think about a way of relating, and everything is relational, I argue not just human things, but actually the whole business of anything that exists comes out of a relational process, a resonant relationship between different aspects of consciousness, which doesn't mean that we make it all up, but we haven't got time to go there. Yeah, no, so if you like, Christ didn't say, these are the bullet points, this is my 5-year plan, go away and do it. When I think about what has really changed my life, it has been knowing people, particularly probably during my adolescence. There were a couple of people, but more than that really, but who influenced me. And people said, well, what did they tell you? And it's not so much what they told me, is that they modeled for me a way of being that I wanted to be like. I wanted to be like them and to have that way of being and approaching the world. And that is the greatest gift, is to be not told how to do something in the abstract with a number of rules. That's just the left hemisphere, and that's the way AI would deal with it.
Hmm.
But is inhabiting the being of another person to the extent that you can, so that you become more like them.
Yeah. How to be, how to have a relationship. It's really the entire story you're telling is a story about a broken relationship, it seems to me, with much of the rest
Yes,
of the world. Broken relationship with nature, with culture, with individual people, with our own
yes,
minds, with our own way of comprehending. Um, it's and that's fundamentally the so-called solution to the problem. It's precisely a solution about a relationship. Interestingly, when Christ appears first in the Bible, the first thing he says is, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." And the translation from the Greek, and I don't know because I don't speak Greek, but repent means turn around. It means change yourself. It means transform yourself. It doesn't mean, as I used to believe, say sorry immediately or God will punish you. It means, you need to transform your heart, because the
Yes.
kingdom of heaven is at hand. And unless you transform yourself, nothing changes. So, as you say, the work that seems to the kind of to the left hemisphere to be a ridiculous waste of time, which is self-transformation, trying to relate differently to things, and not just to other people, but to the natural world as well. Our relationship with nature is so broken. The way that we speak of resources, the way that we speak of harvesting and the rest of it, and
Yes.
even terms like biodiversity, which treat the natural world as a kind of horrible
Absolutely.
mathematical puzzle to be solved. It's and the thing about this as well that's significant, something else we discovered when we were at Dark Mountain, people need communities to do this in. This is the thing.
Yes,
It's
they
very
do.
hard to do on your own. If you feel like you're isolated from the world and you're living in this left hemisphere world and you can see things differently, but you don't know what to do, it's very hard to do it on your own, which is one value of the internet, because people can connect with people who are seeing the same thing. But it seems to me
Yes.
that the kind of work we're talking about requires people to get together and kind of make those changes happen at some community level.
I agree with you, but also I think that puts it too much on its own in the left hemisphere territory, that it's having a plan and talking about it, and of course all that is important. But the thing that a religion offers is a kind of embodied wisdom, which is in acts which are carried out together that have deep meaning and help to change your, you turn round, as you say, convertere in Latin, also ad dominum Deum tuum, you turn round to your God. So conversion is a kind of turning of the mind or the heart, and it will enable you to do that. So I think that true rituals are phenomenally powerful, and I've experienced that in my life in
Yeah,
a
absolutely. Me too.
shatteringly powerful way, that leaves one sort of more or less speechless and so moved. And it's to the left hemisphere, ritual is just a repetition of something that doesn't have a meaning. But this is why I worry enormously about the left hemisphere's attempt to create something that is a simulacrum of thinking in a material object that cannot think, because it also has no body. It cannot understand emotion, except it can read that when humans do this, it causes them to feel something they don't like. And what, but that's not the same as having feeling, and it's not the same as being embodied. They can't be embodied in the way that we are. They're not. They're not organic beings, and they are incapable of knowing what it means to suffer and the prospect of death, which, as Dr. Johnson says, sharpens a man's mind. But the fact that we live in this strange way in which we deny death and we deny suffering, and I mean, in the past, I would have had, from age in my teens, I would have a skull on my desk to remind me that this is where it all ends, and this knowledge of that curiously doesn't undermine the value of what one's doing, but actually gives it meaning. In a world where none of this was true, there wouldn't be any meaning anyway.